Hey, podcasters, welcome back to Light the Path podcast. I'm your host, Deborah the Queen. And look, Pathfinders, I have another great episode for you. If you haven't already, take the time to subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow on all social media outlets. You're definitely going to enjoy this. Today's episode is titled, Who Am I Now? Navigating Life After Loss. What happens when life changes and you are left trying to figure out who you are all over again? Today, I'm joined by Charlaine Martin, author, speaker, and Bible teacher, who shares her journey through loss, grief, and rebuilding her life with faith at the center. Don't that sound so good? Don't y'all need a little bit about that? Listen, if it's not for you, what I would like for you to do is press pause, send this to someone you love that needs to hear this message. Okay? And then come on back. Listen, if you are in a season where everything feels unfamiliar and you're trying to find your footing again, this conversation is for you. Help me welcome Charlaine to Life
Hi,
Podcast.
thank you so much, Deborah. I'm
You're
glad
welcome.
to be here with you.
I am so thankful that you're here. Your story is going to help so many people regain the confidence, regain their faith, and to just navigate life more effectively after loss. So, with your experience with the loss of your husband after a long battle of cancer, what was the transition like for you in those early days when everything changed?
I have to say, I felt like part of my heart was ripped out of my chest. There is such a disorienting feeling when you realize your husband is dead. I knew it was coming, but nothing ever truly prepares you for it. I felt very disoriented and lost because we had dated in high school. And
Hmm.
so we knew each other for 34 years. 4 of the years was dating, and we were married for just 2 weeks short of 30 years. So a lot of my adult life was wrapped up in that identity with him. And so I felt kind of like I was in a haze. Sometimes I would cry, and other times I would be, frozen. And so I had to figure out, how in the world do I keep going? It was really hard. I came home. There was my cat. My cat's there greeting me, but he's also looking for his buddy. His buddy was gone, and he didn't understand. Medical equipment was all over the living room because that was Don's space. My late husband's name was Don. And so I had to face that walking in the door.
Yeah, you talk about the disorientation that comes with losing a spouse. What does that actually look like in everyday life for someone who's walking through that and maybe doesn't even recognize what's going on?
I think that there is a numbness that first hits. And when you realize that you're numb, you can't feel anything at the moment. And then it hits you. What do I do? What am I going to do now, Lord? Are you with me? And there's a lot of blaming that we tend to want to do sometimes too, in that disorientation and confusion. Sometimes people are mad at God. I wasn't mad at God, but I did wonder, Lord, why did you take him away? Here we planned on living the rest of our lives together. But I found myself speaking in the plural still, instead of like, I'm going home, I'm going to do this, or this is mine. I was still saying we and us. And
Mhm.
suddenly it dawned on me, it's I and me. And that was really hard. I found myself still sleeping on half of the bed.
Mm.
I mean, he had been sleeping separately from me for about a year, but I wasn't sleeping well because I used to get up in the middle of the night to help him with things, whether he needed meds, bathroom or whatever. And so I was still sleeping on that half of the bed. I was still waking up in the middle of the night 2 and 3 times. And I started to realize, this is kind of crazy. He's not here. And then, of course, the tears would flow, But I also found myself not wanting to accept it, not wanting to touch grief because it's painful.
It
So
really is.
Valentine's Day comes along, I don't want to deal with Valentine's Day. So I ignore it altogether. And that wasn't helpful either,
So when so much of your identity has been connected to being a wife, how did you begin to rediscover who you were on your own?
That was really eye-opening to realize I'm single. I'm not married anymore. I'm single. I kept introducing myself to people and they would ask me some questions, and somewhere along the line I'd say I was a widow. So I started identifying as a widow. And I thought, I can't keep doing that. He's gone, but I also need to start accepting my own identity. And that took about a year before I could begin to even think about it. But it was hard. It really was. Instead of keeping in my mind when I was, buying things or doing something, I had to stop and think, what would I like? What would I want? What would I do? Because I had a different style of things I like, but I always kept them in mind. Yes. And now I could think through, okay, well, I like this dress. He wouldn't like it, but who cares? I'm going to wear it. Those kinds of things began to creep in after about a year for me, but it changes for everyone. That opened the door to considering more about what I wanted in life. And so I sat down and I began a journey of coming up with a 5-year plan, if you will. What do I want to do or see in 5 years? Mm-hmm. I had to work. I was in a gym as a personal trainer and exercise instructor. Okay, how am I going to sustain my income? Because it's a feast and famine sort of thing. And then, of course, a lot of things changed along the way. And I had to scramble to fill gaps when they cut my hours. 24/7 gyms, and it was $10 a month. When those came in, they hit the gym that I worked for really hard, and they cut our hours. And so I had to think, okay, I can't rely on what he had. I have this a bit of life insurance money. It's only going to last so long. What am I going to do? And so I began developing a plan. And one of the things, believe it or not, when I decided, I'm really not cut out to be alone. As I started a dating profile on a Christian dating site, it really made me think of who I was, what I wanted in life, and what kind of man I wanted. And what I couldn't do is expect to find him again. He doesn't exist anymore. He's in heaven with the Lord, So I had to start thinking, okay, what are the big things that I would want in a man? And one of them is being a Christian. Yes. We go to church, know God's word. There were certain characteristics that I really wanted, but there were a lot of things I didn't want. And I also had to think those things through. But one day, I went to church. I'd had several dud dates. I broke up with a guy that he was not what he said he was. He worshipped at St. Mattress instead of going to church. And he drank, he smoked. He wasn't who he said he was. And so that just really hurt. And I thought, this dating thing is just painful. Do I even want to do this? And so one Sunday morning, I went to church. And I was sitting there praying and waiting for the service to start. And God just kind of nudged me. He said, do you know how Samuel picked King David, he went through Jesse's sons one at a time, and I told him no with each one. I want you to ask me yes or no with each man. This is not a shopping trip. That just really made a huge difference in my life. I had to really rely on God for my job, and He led me to some great Christian people that helped me get jobs. He provided for me every time, but He also started pointing out who in the world He had for me already that I didn't know yet.
Mm.
So,
Charlaine, I just have to commend you. I have to break in here. I have to commend you being courageous to do the apps because I'm single and I have not been courageous enough to do the app. So I want to commend you for that. And then the second part, this conversation is not going to only help people who are going through loss of a spouse, also people who are in the divorce space. Because as you were saying some of these things, I want to raise my hand like, ooh, I felt like that. And almost a mirror to you when you were saying, you were into yourself as a widow. I, on the other hand, was introducing myself as divorced. And
yes.
so after I got divorced, I had to reestablish medical care in a new place where I was living. And it had on there, single or married.
Oh, wow. That was it.
And that was it. And I boo-hooed. I melted like a popsicle on a hot day.
Oh, wow.
I
Yeah.
said, but I'm divorced. And the Lord said, you're single. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, my mom rushes over, I'm filling out in front of this, clerk or whoever. Mom was like, what? What did they ask? Like, did they say something? And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
there's only two choices here.
Yes. Yes.
So I think that's very courageous in that this is going to help twofold. You talked about in that season of grief and rebuilding, how God's presence just starts saying, hey, ask me yes or no. I want to get to your book. Ooh, I love this title.
Mm-hmm.
Twice Blessed. Yes. Oh, I love this title. Twice Blessed, Learning to Live and Love Again. What did it take emotionally and spiritually to open your heart again to love?
Well, first, just writing the book took 10 years. It was my therapy. God
Mm.
had called me to write just a few months before my late husband passed away. I was singing in a Christian women's conference. He was a pastor. And so I was there with these ladies, and I wasn't getting anything out of the message. And I thought, okay, Lord, I know I'm supposed to minister to these ladies, pray with them, talk with them, whatever it is. But is there something in this message for me? And there was not. And all I heard was this still small voice. I want you to write. And so that's when I started this. But opening my heart up to love, as you asked, it was the realization that I was not cut out to be single. I sat in my apartment. I had my cat, sweet cat, but cats don't replace husbands. And I had moved closer to my kids. And I
Okay.
love my children and grandchildren, but they couldn't fill that gap. So, what I had to be careful of as I began to put myself out onto a Christian dating site, and I wanted to make sure that I was careful. And I went to two sites, and they were places where some friends had met their husbands. And so I had to be very cautious as I put myself out there. And so I learned a lot about who I was in that process. And I had one guy say, you are the woman for me. God told me I was going to marry you. And I said, interesting. He didn't tell me the same thing. God bless you in your search. So, yeah, opening my heart up was a scary thing. I had not dated since I was in high school. And so I didn't know how to go about dating as an adult, especially midlife. I was in my 40s. I was like 48 when he died, and he was only 50. So at any rate, we had one child still at home when he was diagnosed, one getting married, and one moved out of the house. So
Mm-hmm.
4 years later, that same daughter who graduated from high school was graduating from college when he died. And so, just trying to think, okay, I'm going to put myself out there. What's that going to be like for my family too?
Yeah.
Because that affects them, even though I didn't have children still living at home, which would be a bigger deal. I still had to consider their feelings. And I didn't put myself out there until about a year after he died. And I expected it to take a while. And I went out on dates and, often said, well, I don't know about you, but I'm not getting anything here. I don't feel a connection at all. God bless you in your search, kindly, not bluntly, and sometimes they said that to me, and that was fine too, because I didn't want to be married to the wrong person. My mother had been abused.
Mm.
I was a child that was in domestic violence twice with my mother. And so I didn't want that situation again. God had given me my first husband. If he could give me my first husband, he could give me the next one. And so,
Absolutely.
and so one day, after I sat there in church and God told me, ask me one man at a time, yes or no, I got this message on one of the dating sites. It wasn't a Christian one, but when you're on the non-Christian ones, you put your faith on there. That way, and they know what your belief systems are. And then you
Mm-hmm.
have some sort of common ground. But I got this message after a couple of weeks of not touching it. And he said, if your profile's true, we've got to meet. And I thought, whoa, he's a little too excitable. I'm not sure about this. But we had a conversation. There's safety and distance, And so when we finally decided to meet, we actually hit it off. We felt a connection. And, that made a big difference. But he was hurt too. He went through divorce. And so he was very cautious as well. We didn't get engaged until about 2 years after we had been, started dating. But we talked for several weeks, almost 2 months before we actually met each other. And so, it was a cautious thing. It's a scary thing. Not everybody on those dating sites are safe. Not everybody you meet at church is safe. I had a friend who met a guy, thought he was great, was a Christian. She married him and he beat her. She had to leave. So those things were on my mind as I went out, but I had been a self-defense instructor. So I knew what to watch for, and I would defend if I needed. But, I always went carefully and cautiously. I always told my kids where I was going, who I was with, and when I should be back home. And that way they could check on me if they hadn't heard from me. So,
Absolutely. That is so good. This is my final question that I have. For the woman listening who is grieving and unsure of who she is now, what is one step she can take this week to begin moving forward with God?
start a prayer journal. That was one of the biggest things that really helped me to begin. I had a smartphone, and at the time it was safe to actually journal things on your smartphone. Now I wouldn't recommend it. But I started writing out my prayers and laying it out before God, the scripture passage for that day that I had read. And I just laid it all out before him. And every so often I would go back through my prayers and I would see God speaking back to me through all of that. Sometimes I would pray something and then I would hear something from someone, because God speaks through his word, circumstances, other Christians. there are things that, we can gauge to some degree when we feel here and we know that was God.
Yes.
So those prayer journals are a great reflection point for you to go back and see, what God has been doing in you, growing you. I mean, if you're angry with God, you can pray about that as long as you are talking to him and you lay all that anger out in front of him like this big wadded mess and say, here, I'm angry. I don't like what happened. When you think of Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah in the book of Ruth, Naomi lost her husband and then her two sons. And so when she got back to Bethlehem with Ruth, her friends and family greeted her and said, "Oh, it's great to see you, Naomi." And she goes, "Don't call me Naomi, I'm Mara. God has dealt bitterly with me."
Yes.
It's okay to lay that out before him. He understands. He already knows anyway. But
Absolutely.
when we knowingly and free willingly put that out there, he slowly heals us. He works us around like that clay and remolds us into the very image of his son. But sometimes, if we won't let go and give it over to him, that just eats away. It eats away. One of the things I learned after he died, I was going to a church. We had left the church that he pastored because he could no longer pastor anymore. And there was this wonderful pastor there that started a group about forgiveness. It was a Bible study. Wow. That was powerful. I had taught about forgiveness, but it was my turn to be the student. And I could pour my heart out. In my book, I talk about the possibilities of what caused the cancer. And one of them was a crop duster. And I don't want to spoil the story for you. But I had to forgive that man who dumped all those farm chemicals out when my husband was out mowing the lawn and that stuff engulfed him. Was that the cause, or was it that he had been he'd been dealing with heavy metals in the investment casting industry, like airfoils and things like that? And those were connected with cancer too. And the timing from either of those was right spot on. I had to give that up. I had to forgive. And as I forgave, I felt like somebody had just lifted a huge weight off my shoulders. And you can see that kind of thing in your prayer journal. You can see that. And one of the things that my new husband and I did before we got married was we fasted and prayed.
So good.
I didn't want to make a mistake. He didn't want to make a mistake. So we went on a partial fast because I was working in health and fitness, demonstrating exercises and all that kind of thing. I still had to be able to function.
Yes.
So I eliminated soda pop, anything that was a luxury item, that was gone. Okay. I stuck with very basics like water, vegetables, basic meat, no sauces or anything. And that's what I ate and drank. But during the meal time, I prayed. Lord, is this the man? And he did the same thing too. And at the end, we compared notes. And one of the things I learned being married is that when God is telling you something, he's also telling your spouse. And then when you talk about it, you will agree together in the Lord.
Yes.
So that's what happened in our fasting and prayer time. We both got a yes.
So good. So good to come to the Lord, for the Lord to tell you, hey, bring them here one by one. And then you follow through. And then y'all take it even further with the fasting and praying. That is so beautiful. So beautiful. Can you let the listeners know where they can connect with you and where to buy your book?
Okay, you can connect with me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and X. The book, Twice Blessed, Learning to Live and Love Again, this is what the cover looks like, so you know, because there are other Twice Blessed books and have nothing to do with death and loss. You can get it on Amazon. You can go to my website, but if you click on the link, it will take you straight to Amazon. You can also get it on Walmart.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and Bookshop.com, I believe. But yeah, there's plenty of places you can get it.
Absolutely. Listen, Pathfinders, you will not have to go far because I'm going to put the link in the description right down here. You're just going to be able to point and click to be able to get Twice Blessed. Charlaine, thank you so much for your testimony, your light that you're shedding. Pathfinders, remember that sharing our experiences is not only empowering, it can help light the path.